Shadow Slave, Chapter 60 Bone Ridge. At first, Sunny didn't immediately grasp what Cassie meant. The spire from your vision? The one with 7 seals? He asked. Cassie nodded slowly. Yes, in my dream, it towered like a mountain. I could see it clearly from the walls of the human stronghold. It loomed far away, like a massive red spear piercing the sky. When the sun dipped low, its shadow stretched across the land, falling over the castle and far beyond, reaching toward the east. She paused, her tone turning distant. The feeling I got when I looked at it was the same unease you've described, only more intense. Sunny frowned, thinking back to her words about that vision. 7 severed heads guarding 7 seals. A fading angel consumed by hungry shadows. A terrifying, suffocating sense of loss. What was this crimson spire truly? Do you think it's red because it's made of the same stuff as this place? He asked, gesturing at the jagged reef around them. What they called coral wasn't actual coral, just something similar. Its true nature remained a mystery. Cassie considered. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the labyrinth was formed from whatever the spire is made of. It was a chilling idea, that the spire might be the origin of this entire nightmare. Sunny couldn't shake the thought that the spire, somehow, was at the heart of it all. He just hoped it wasn't where their path would ultimately lead. Now that he understood the reason for his unease, it became easier to manage. And surprisingly, there was a hidden benefit. When he felt the spire's shadow, it always pointed west, which meant the human settlement was somewhere between their position and that direction. In a twisted way, the spire had become his compass. A voice cut through his thoughts. "Get ready," Nephi said, shaking off the distraction. Sunny refocused. They were nearing the Bone Ridge. The name had come to mind the moment they laid eyes on it. Even from a distance, the formation stood out starkly. A jagged, pale ridge of ivory bone, rising above the crimson reef like a spine through a blood-soaked sea. It was the skeleton of some enormous sea creature, draped over a massive growth of chaotic coral. The curved bones of its spine rose high above the ground, forming a jagged ridge. Whatever this creature had been in life, it had been massive, even by the standards of the creatures lurking in the dark sea. It wasn't the first giant skeleton they'd come across. The labyrinth was scattered with colossal remains. But something about this one was different. To Sunny, it looked as though the crimson coral wasn't just growing around the bones. It was sprouting from them, like the reef was feeding off the ancient corpse. When he looked at the landscape, it felt like blood turned to stone had flowed out from these bones and stained the entire labyrinth. He couldn't help but believe that if someone dug down through the mud, beneath the roots of the crimson forest, they'd find nothing but endless layers of fossilized remains. Disturbing thought. Still, this particular creature was special. Its spine arched high enough that a portion of it would remain above water even after the tide came in. That's why they'd chosen the Bone Ridge as their next camp. But they had to act fast. Dusk was near. Before they could settle in, they had to climb the massive coral mound and check if any other creature had claimed the bones for shelter. If something was already there, they'd have to fight. There wasn't time to retreat. The final stretch was always the riskiest. Skirting around the base of the mound, the group searched for a viable route upward. Eventually, they arrived at the shattered skull of the beast. Its lower jaw was missing or buried, but the upper portion had formed a yawning cavern. Sunny felt a chill crawl down his spine as he stepped under the arch of massive teeth and entered the skull. His shadow moved ahead to scout, while the group made their way through the skull and into the hollow tunnel of the creature's spine. The path inside was wide, almost like a road, with beams of fading daylight filtering through gaps in the bone above. The passage tilted upward, and most of it was hidden around a bend in the spine. When the echo entered, its many legs clattered loudly across the bone. Nephi grimaced. "Any movement?" Sunny shook his head. His shadow hadn't sensed anything. "Let's proceed," she said. Still, they drew their weapons. Caution had saved their lives more than once. Fortunately, there were no threats waiting in the tunnel. The remains were empty. They reached the top of the spine without trouble. By now, the sun was low, The dark sea was creeping back in, its tide whispering beneath the rising waters below. Sunny unstrapped the saddlebags and dismissed the echo, making the tight space feel suddenly more open. All of them were in desperate need of a wash. Sunny gave the girls some privacy and walked a bit away. Sitting down, he let his body relax as his shadow returned to its task, watching the water's edge for anything emerging. As the tide continued to rise, he opened the runes to check his shadow fragments. Shadow fragments. 96/1000. Not bad, he had started with just 12. In a month, the number had surged. He was getting stronger, faster, more skilled. But even now, he was no match in raw strength for the monsters of the Forgotten Shore. Not until his shadow core awakened, and that wouldn't happen until they returned to the real world. How long until I can beat a scavenger barehanded? The answer, sadly, was not soon. Sighing, he waited his turn to wash. Cassie returned, cheeks pink and refreshed, and handed him the bottle of endless water. He walked back to his spot, removing the puppeteer's shroud. The cool breeze made him shiver. Dirt, blood, and grime clung to his skin. Being an awakened was far from glamorous. While he bathed, Nephites used the last light to start a fire and cook. They even had salt now, salvaged from the seabed after the tide receded. At first it had seemed unappetizing, but they'd gotten used to it. It made the food taste much better. They ate in silence, too tired to talk. Soon, it was time for rest. Sunny took first watch. As the others slept, he began his sword practice. Moving through the forms, part of his mind stayed focused on the water below, watching through his shadow. Tonight, the sea was calm. No wind disturbed the water's surface. A black mirror, smooth and still. It was the first time he'd seen it like this. The darkness was captivating. He suddenly felt a strange compulsion, a pull to come closer and look into the still water, to gaze at his reflection. But he didn't move, because he was terrified of what might look back.